Hello and welcome to Challenging Behaviors in Young Children. My name is Janelle Piquel and I am a Disability Services Specialist here at LACO at the Head Start and Early Learning Division, and I will be the one providing your training for you today. A little background on myself is that I am a board certified behavior analyst or BCBA. I've worked with individuals with disabilities in home and school settings from ages 2 to 25 for about 15 years now, as well as I have 3 young children. So I get to deal with early childhood and challenging behaviors every day. Today during this training, our objectives are that we will explore how implicit bias can impact perceived challenging behaviors. We're going to navigate the why or the function of behaviors, as well as identify some common areas and activities within our classrooms that can trigger challenging behaviors, and review some strategies that will address the challenging behaviors in the areas that we've identified. So how challenging is this for you? So this is an activity for us to explore how different types of behaviors may impact us. Here you see that there are 4 different behaviors listed. Each of the behaviors, when thinking about it, you might want to think about how challenging do I find that specific behavior. So we use sometimes a rubber band to expand how challenging you may or may not find it. The farther you stretch it, the more challenging you find it, and the less you stretch it, the less challenging you find it. Let's look at the behaviors up here. The first one is asking, but why? In that high, whiny, pitched voice after everything you ask the child to do. So reflecting back on how you would feel about that behavior, do you find it challenging or do you not find it very challenging? Now think about the next one, which would be extended periods of loud crying or dropping to the ground. Loud, long periods of crying, we're thinking like 20 to 35 minutes of crying. When looking at these different behaviors, what's important for us to understand is some things we may find challenging, others may not find challenging, as well as we all have a different tolerance for different types of behaviors. And this can really have an impact on what we understand as challenging behaviors because of our own past experiences or experiences in dealing with children at a certain age, developmentally, or the types of behaviors we've encountered through our time. All of these, is really important for us to understand that each of us has a different one. So what some people may find challenging, others may not, as well as what we define as a chronically challenging behavior. So let's review what is not a challenging behavior. And so what I'm talking about here is really for us to understand with young children, ages 3 to 5, or really even birth to 5, development is so rapid at this time. And there's so many changes, even just between the ages of 3 and 5. So what are not chronically challenging behaviors are anything that we should find that would be developmentally or age appropriate, which sometimes isn't the most fun behaviors to have to deal with. So thinking about, there should be some occasional crying. We should encounter children within this age range crying, yelling, including tantrums, which could include those crying, yelling, running, throwing, hitting, biting, dropping to the ground. All of those would be occasionally occurring, meaning that this is how they learn their boundaries. This is how they learn what they can and can't do. This is how they test different people. So these are things that we would see occasionally. Even though they can be challenging, these aren't chronically challenging behaviors. They should be expected to occur, as well as some separation anxiety. Separation anxiety can be very difficult. Separation anxiety is not your few-minute crying at drop-off from parents or family, but really looking at longer periods of time and occurring for a longer period of time. So this could be crying that occurs for 20, 30, or 40 minutes each day, lasting maybe even up to 2 to 3 months of the separation. Of course, we can always provide strategies and comfort to the child to help with their separation anxiety, but with the age of children, the young children, we would expect that some children are going to have that separation anxiety and that the crying may occur for extended periods of time. Oftentimes with children in the ages 3 to 5, we're going to see lack of impulse control. Their brains haven't developed this yet. So we're going to see a lot of grabbing, yelling, a lot of those impulse controls, getting up out of nowhere, Those are to be expected and to be occurring often with this age of development, as well as asking why. Why do I have to go to that? Why do I have to sit down? Why do I have to read a book? All of those questions are really for their understanding of why things are occurring and not to be challenging or not to become in a control battle with somebody. Asking why again is very developmentally appropriate, and they're probably going to ask why often, although sometimes it can be difficult for us because we're trying to do many different things and we have many different children asking why. It is not them being defiant. It is not them trying to have a control battle with you. It is truly them trying to understand how and why things work around us. And oftentimes we're going to hear that wonderful word of no. No, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want to go there. No, I don't want to share. And again, saying no is very developmentally appropriate. So keeping in mind that these are not challenging behaviors when they're occurring. However, they are expected to occur with the age range of children we are working with of 3 to 5. So what is a challenging behavior? A challenging behavior is when behaviors are consistent across people, time, or environment. So when thinking about chronically challenging behaviors or frequent challenging behaviors or children engaging in challenging behaviors often, we really want to see that those behaviors are consistent either across time, meaning it's been happening for a certain amount of time, maybe for 3 or 4 weeks, 5 or 6 months. Also within the time of the day, thinking about it's not only crying and having that 30-minute crying fit during separation anxiety, that could be separation anxiety during the drop off, right? But they're crying 30 minutes in the morning, they cry after nap time, they cry throughout the day for extended periods of time. People, if we're seeing that a behavior is occurring only with one individual, maybe with one teacher, or the child is struggling to play with one child, then typically those aren't those chronically challenging behaviors. We really need to take a closer look at potentially the relationship between the teacher and the child, or why the teacher is finding that so challenging, or between the two children. What is happening with the interactions between the two children that could potentially be causing these to be the child to engage in some challenging behaviors? Or the behavior could be consistent across environments. So this could be home and school, but it also can be inside and outside, mealtime and nap time, large group and small group, interest area time, and all the other different times. So we want to see that, maybe the child's only struggling during nap time. If the child has no other behaviors except for during nap time, then again, we need to look at why is nap time so difficult for that child. So when we see that our behaviors are occurring across either one or more of the time, people, or environments, as well as we want to see that the behavior is not directed easily with universal supports. So if we're able to redirect the behavior with using a simple schedule, with using a motivational item, with using some redirections, and the child is responsive to it, so the child starts to cry, we're able to redirect them, even though it's happening across time and people, then that's okay. But when we see that the child is not able to be redirected and universal supports are in play, meaning we're, changing toys, we have enough toys, we're using different types of basic visual supports for the child, the environment is clean and organized, and we're still seeing challenging behaviors occur, then we know that that really more is a challenging behavior or chronically challenging behavior because it's not supported through the universal supports when they are consistent or when the redirections are consistent. When strategies used on a consistent basis and the behavior is not decreasing with intensity, duration, or frequency. So here we're looking at those strategies that we kind of are discussing, and that when they're being used on a consistent basis, meaning all the time that they should be being used, not infrequently, but each time that there should be the strategy being used, that it is being used. I typically say consistency should be using a strategy for 21 days or more. And that means that with that being used, they're using their daily schedule and interactive with the daily schedule for 21 days, and we don't see any change in behavior, meaning that the intensity is not any less, the duration, the length of the behavior is not any shorter, or the frequency of the behavior, meaning how often it's happening, isn't any shorter, then we would say that that's more of a chronically challenging behavior. We typically will see when consistent strategies are in place, there'll be some change in behavior, either in all of those areas or one of those areas. as well as if the behavior continues to be a safety risk to themselves or others. So we're looking at safety risks of hurting themselves by biting themselves, banging their heads on walls, or to others. So again, throwing large items, pulling, grabbing, scratching, kicking, causing harm to either children in the classroom or the teacher in the classroom. So this kind of leads me into, this is going to be a short video that we're going to watch, and this is from Yale, and it's about preschool and early childhood educators and challenging behaviors. So I'd like for us to watch this, and it talks about how potentially implicit bias could contribute to some perceived challenging behaviors.
There's a new study out of the Yale Child Study Center that I had to read a few times just to believe what it was telling me. The researchers recruited about 135 preschool teachers. They had them watch video footage of 4 kids playing, a black boy, a black girl, a white boy, and a white girl. And they told the teachers, their subjects, watch the video, there may be some challenging behaviors. As soon as you see something that could become challenging, hit the enter key on your keypad. Well, here's the trick. There was no challenging behavior. The researchers were using eye scan technology to see which child the teachers were looking at the most. And what they found is that the teachers, both white and black alike, spent the most time watching the black boy, waiting for bad behavior that never came. There's one more really interesting headline in this study, which comes later. The teachers were also given a 1-paragraph description to read of a hypothetical child with a stereotypical name who behaves pretty badly in class, pushes, scratches, throws toys. And some of the teachers were also given some biographical information that helped make sense of that behavior. They were told that the child lives with his mother, father has been in and out for years, they're relatively poor, the mother is depressed, works 3 jobs. Researchers wanted to know if knowing this information made the teachers more empathetic to the kid. Well, here's the shock. It did, but only if the teacher and the child were of the same race. If the teacher and the child, a white teacher and a black child, or even a black teacher and a white child, knowing that biographical information, those teachers were less empathetic towards those students. And here's why this matters. Imagine if this is true, if there's this empathy deficit in preschool, well, imagine where else that's true.
So that's a pretty powerful video that we just watched, and it could be quite interesting or maybe something you haven't thought of yet. And I think that it's really important for us to understand how these biases occur and could occur around the individuals working with the children and what they perceive to be those challenging behaviors. I'll share a story that one time I was at one agency, but across 4 different classrooms, and I had been called in to provide coaching to those classrooms because they each classroom had a child with a challenging behavior. And so when I went into each of the classrooms and after them sharing with me the child that they found to be the most challenging across these 4 different classrooms, that all 4 children were black boys. And so taking this information, it just really made us think about, and I did bring to the attention of the director of, could it be coincidence or is there something else going on here? These types of implicit bias do occur all the time, and it's okay for us to have these thoughts, but it's not okay for us to not act on them. And so I think what's really important for us to take from here is when we have staff or when we're identifying children that are always challenging is potentially, are there any biases that are playing a role in this? Oftentimes in education, we see that a lot of the challenging students are most frequently boys. Even think about a child that you think to have been found challenging in your past. Was it a boy? And most of the teachers or our staff within classrooms are female. So what kind of biases could occur there? And is that playing a role in the teacher just waiting for that behavior happen? Think about when we have our head turned and we hear, a yell or something fall. Is the first thought in our head is, what did he do now? Or what did that one child do? So I think what's important for us to take from this is to be aware that these things are happening, and that they could be a possibility of why potentially these perceived challenging behaviors are occurring. So at this time, I would just think of you to rethink, are you aware of your own biases that occur, that you may have, as well as how do we minimize and educate staff about implicit biases regarding challenging behaviors? What can we do to help better educate them? What can we do to help them change if they've noticed that these are occurring? Or what can we do to support a teacher if we see that this could be potentially playing a role within it? So it brings me to the question of whose problem is it? So when we have a defined challenging behavior, we're thinking, oh, this is occurring. We've kind of decided, yes, this is a challenging behavior. Or if someone comes to you and is like, I need, this is happening in my class. Whose problem is it? And so when I talk about whose problem is it, I'm really talking about the behavior. Whose problem is the behavior? Is it truly a challenging behavior? Does it kind of check our list that we went over, that it is something that's happening across people and time? Are we trying some basic strategies consistently and are they not impacting the behavior? Or is this truly a big safety risk that people or individuals may be potentially getting hurt or are getting hurt? Or is that behavior our hot button for the teacher, right? So we kind of talked about a few of these at the beginning. What behaviors are you able to tolerate more often than others? Is this maybe one of those behaviors that really just triggers you? You just have very little patience for it, really stretches your rubber band. Thinking about potentially, when we hear that there's a challenging behavior occurring, is this truly a challenging behavior? Or is this a behavior that we're having a hard time coping with and not finding to be productive and is really triggering us to have responses towards that behavior? And now we're kind of almost hyper focusing on that type of behavior and making it a bigger deal than what it is. So the next part of this is I really want to review the functions or understanding the why behind the behaviors. So all behaviors have a form of communication. It's the child trying to tell us something, their wants and needs, what they want to have access to, how they're feeling, what they want. And so being able to identify that purpose or why behind the behavior, and this could be behaviors, I'm talking about both good and bad or challenging behaviors. Good behaviors such as using their words, going to the bathroom, asking for my turn, raising their hand, saying, excuse me, using your name. All of those are forms of communication. They come up to you and use their words to get something they want or need. Or thinking of more challenging behaviors, scratching, hitting, pinching, running, throwing, swiping everything off the table. All of those could also be behaviors. And why are they actually doing that behavior? Being able to identify the reason behind the behavior will help us prevent any problem behaviors from occurring in the future, because we would be able to teach them more appropriate or acceptable ways to receive their need or want besides engaging in that challenging behavior. As well as understanding the function of behavior also helps us decrease those problem behaviors and increase those desired behaviors. So in applied behavior analysis, we believe that there are 4 functions to every behavior that we do, that adults do, that children do. And those 4 functions of behavior are attention, escape or avoidance, access to item, or automatic reinforcement, or what oftentimes people consider sensory-based. So access to attention. Access to attention is when someone desires access or social interactions from another individual. And it's important to note here that when we think access to attention, it's not always positive attention, right? It could be also negative attention that child's receiving. It could be that the teacher's upset or disapproved or has a negative facial expression or asks or becomes upset with them. Those could be negative attention seeking as well, but they still have the same function as attention seeking. An example of this could be a child says, hey, look at me, if screaming to access attention. And if you say, in the middle of your group time, the child's like, hey, teacher, and you give your attention, you turn to them, then that is serving the function of attention, and you gave attention to them for them screaming or yelling and getting up in the middle of circle time. So here on the screen, we see that I kind of identified times that we typically see it. Of course, this can happen at any moment. It really depends on the child and the individual, but these are very typical times that we could see attention-seeking behavior occur, which is during like circle time or large group time or activities, small group activities, And we typically see that happening during those times because the staff is interacting or the teachers are interacting with multiple children at one time. There's not really an individualized approach at that point. And so we do see children maybe fighting for that attention or looking for attention from teachers. Also during interest area or free choice time and outside time. So the reason why we see it during these times is, again, it's not really a one-to-one opportunity for the child. They are having more access to different items. They may be looking for attention from their peers during that time. Again, because it's not like a paired activity that they have the exact attention of a specific peer at one-on-one or a teacher. So we see more of attention-seeking behaviors during these times of the day. So here on the screen, you see there's some additional examples. The first one is a child is walking by a peer playing. Maybe they want to play with the child. They either could or could not have the language to do it, but they just go over and hit one of the children. Typically, when we hit another peer, we get some type of response. The child would get a response potentially from the child of crying or, hey, I don't like that, or they could push them back. And usually the teacher will also respond in that moment to the behavior and talk to the child about their hands are not for hitting or how to have gentle hands or how to be a good friend. So the child is still receiving attention. Again, that isn't necessarily positive attention, but it is attention. And the next one on the screen is a child raising their hand when being called on. So this is more the child raises their hand, we call on them, they're receiving attention for their positive behavior and positive attention. To escape or avoid. So typically we see that this behavior will happen if tasks are too hard or too easy, right? So if a child is bored or not, if it's too easy for them, they're bored, they're not engaged in the activity, then they don't want to do it. So when they don't want to do it, they just do something else to keep themselves entertained. If something is too hard, then the child doesn't have interest in it as well because they become frustrated. They don't want to do it. So they want to escape that activity. Also, when something is new or not of interest to the child. So anytime we bring something new that they've never done or experienced, some children are very willing and excited, but other children get very timid or worried about that new thing. And so they want to escape or avoid interacting with that new activity or new toy or new person. So they may engage in a behavior so that they don't have to do that activity, as well as if it's not of interest to the child. Again, kind of going back to the idea of bored. If the child has no interest in that, then they don't want to be around it. They don't want to play that toy. They don't want to be part of that book. They don't want to be a part of that group. Then the child could engage in some challenging behaviors in order to escape or avoid something that they don't have interest in. And that could be a person or if a person or an environment is adverse to them. So if the environment is overstimulating, if it's something that they don't find pleasurable, they may want to avoid or escape that. We see this a lot of time. We could see this with hand washing. The child doesn't want to hand wash. It's the cold water. It's the tactile experience of water that they don't like. They may engage in some escape behaviors to avoid having to wash their hands. Or if a person is aversive to them, so a child that has often hit them or not had a good relationship with either a teacher or a child, they may avoid or escape wanting to engage with that person or child. And that could be in the way that they escape or avoid it is in a challenging behavior. Again, the times that we see these types of behaviors could be during smaller, large group, again, because usually those have less options for the child to have something of interest. So they may want to escape or avoid it, as well as those are oftentimes opportunities where it's not as individualized. So it could be an activity or a that is too difficult or too easy for that child. So they don't want to have to be there. Also, if the environment is very loud, it could be aversive to them, so they don't want to be a part of it. So thinking about if we have music playing or there's a lot of children and commotion going on in the environment. So if the environment is busy, visually, auditorily, too many options, they can also engage in some escape or avoidance behaviors during that time because it's overwhelming for them. So they don't want to be a part of it. So they're trying to escape or avoid it. They could be running out of the classroom. They could be hiding under desks. They could be doing those types of challenging behaviors. So here is an example of Elsa starts to scream and cry, but for Chris, he's very sensitive to her scream. So he runs over and hides in a corner. So he goes and hides in a corner so that he doesn't have to be a part of that aversive scream that Elsa is engaging in. Also, I've seen this where the child, like say Chris in this example, could go over and push Elsa over, thinking that if he could push her, then she may stop the screaming. So he engaged in a challenging behavior to escape the sound of her screaming. The third function is access to items. So this one is pretty self-explanatory. It's when a person engages in a behavior in order to access an item, to have, to be able to play with something or to have it. So this is when they want a preferred activity or an item. And so we do see a lot of this happening during free choice, right? So free choice time or interest area times or free play time, because there are so many options of activities and toys to play with, that we could see some challenging behaviors because they want a specific toy that they maybe don't at that time have access to because someone else is playing with it or it's not available at that time. Whenever we have new activities or toys, so say the example below talks about there's a new house area and they've created an ice cream shop. It's new to the whole class. So during free choice time, 6 children run to that area, right? They all want to play with the new ice cream shop. It's new, fun, and exciting. And Mike pushes the children out of the way because he wants to have access to that ice cream shop and those toys that are in that area. So he starts pushing everybody out of their way because he wants access to it. So we do see that whenever we introduce something new or different, especially with like activities or toys, we could see some challenging behaviors. Outside time, so because due to the outside time is more limited than our inside time, we could see a higher frequency or higher more frequent challenging behaviors because they're trying to access all the different items outside because they typically have more time inside than outside. Also, if we have a limited amount of items, so if we only have a few baby dolls or a few cash registers or a few puzzles, and those are high interest of children, we'll see a lot more of that challenging behavior for access to items. They're pushing, shoving, hitting, pulling, fighting over those types of things. And the last one is automatic reinforcement, or sensory, what people call it. So this function of the behavior, this is when a person engages in a behavior because it feels good to them. So we don't necessarily need another person to do this behavior. We do it because it gives the sensation we receive. It feels good to us inside. So that's why we engage in that behavior. So with this behavior, there aren't actually any times of day or activities that we see it happening most, because this one will occur during it should occur kind of all over the place in a sense. So if it is occurring during any time of the day, any place or any environment and across people and environments, that usually tells us it could be under the function of behavior of automatic reinforcement. So say that the child is seeking some tactile input from touching specific items. So maybe it's like touching children's clothing or hair. They like the way it feels, and they sometimes are pulling on the children. We wouldn't see that only during times that they're close, or only during large group times, or only during outside time. We would really see it across different children that have similar types of hair or clothing items, same type of texture. We could see them during when they're playing with the child or when they're not playing with the child, during large group or small group. Really, it can happen at any time, any place kind of thing. Some examples of these that we see typically would be like hand flapping or making repeated noises or movements. So a child pacing around the classroom, making specific sounds. It could be a phrase, it could be a noise, running. So the child they like the input that they receive from running around. So again, they would get up and run during different times of the day. It wouldn't just be to escape, or, they don't like something, so they go and run out of the classroom. They would be running around constantly during different times of day. Jumping can also be this, and this can become challenging when they're jumping and disruptive during the classroom, or if they're jumping off of furniture or chairs or tables. That's when it becomes more of a challenging behavior. Or if a child is seeking pressure off of another child or person, that they start banging their heads on walls or dropping to the ground hardly, or shoving or running themselves into other people to receive that input. And so this one we see that it doesn't have any consistent times of day that it would be occurring. And that's kind of our indicator of what type of function it is. So now that we've talked about the 4 different functions of behavior and our own hot buttons potentially, it's really important for us to move into ways that we can support challenging behaviors. And one of the biggest things is that it all begins with the relationship. So we know that all children need to have a nurturing and responsive environment with teachers, right? they need to feel safe within their classroom, and they need to feel a part of that classroom, a part of that community, feeling loved. And not only should this relationship be with the child, but it really needs to be with the family. And so thinking about what does the child observe when we see the family? How are we treating the family? Are we respectful? Are we speaking to them nicely? Are we empathetic? Do we have a smile? Those kinds of things. Because if the child doesn't see us having a good relationship with their family, what are we modeling for them? Another thing is that we know that nurturing and responsive environments foster an environment in which social emotional learning can occur. So when we have a good relationship, when we're responsive to them, we can have opportunities to teach social emotional learning. And when social emotional can occur, or those skills, we can identify emotions and coping strategies and self-regulation and what to do when we feel upset and how to support a friend, how to ask for help. When we can teach those skills, because of our nurturing and relationships and nurturing environments, then we will see a lower rate of challenging behavior. And research shows that. And so I think it's also important for us to understand that when we have a child or children that are engaging in challenging behaviors, sometimes they are the hardest children to connect with, because we have a hard time being nurturing and responsive because they are having these challenging behaviors. And maybe we are getting hurt and they are taking a lot of our time and testing our patience. And so it could be really difficult to build a relationship with that child. However, it is actually the most important thing you can do for that child is to build a relationship, understanding that we can't get anywhere if we don't have a relationship with that child. You can try any strategy in the book, but none of them will really stick or work if that child does not have a relationship with the staff in their classroom. So we talked about the different times of day, the different functions of behavior, and when we could potentially see those types of functions of behavior occurring. And so I also wanted to provide those strategies about when we typically see challenging behaviors occur. So within early childhood and in really most any educational setting, these are probably the times of day where you think about a lot of challenging behaviors. So during transitions, big transitions and small transitions, just transitions in general are difficult for all people, including very young children. If we have long periods of sitting, so thinking about our large group or small group opportunities that we have within classrooms, and free choice time. So that could be both free choice time or unstructured time, both indoor or outdoor. So we're going to review each of these areas and provide some strategies on how to go in depth with each of these. So transitions. Transitions, like I said, are difficult for all children, and our days are filled with transitions. And so one of the ways that we can really support transitions is to decrease the number of transitions throughout the day. So as I said, that we go through many, many transitions, and children do. And a lot of times they kind of just have to go with the transition. So if we can think about ways to really decrease the amount of transitions. So for example, when I was working in a classroom with a teacher and children, it was cleanup time. They were during their free time or their interest area time, and so they needed to clean up. So they cleaned up their toys and they had to go sit on the large carpet for everyone to finish cleaning up. And from the large carpet, they then had to go line up to go use the bathroom because they were going to go outside. So they had them line up and wait in line to use the bathroom. Well, there's only 3 stalls, so only 3 children get to go at a time while the rest wait in line. They wait in line to go to the bathroom, then they have to wash their hands. So waiting in line potentially to even wash their hands, how many children are in the bathroom? After they washed their hands, they had to go line up at the door. They went to go line up at the door and they stayed in line until the children, everybody was done using the bathroom. And then once they were done lining up at the door, they walked outside to the playground area and they sat on a line. And when they sat on the line, they described and shared with them what the expectations or the rules of being outside were. And then after explaining the expectations and the rules, the children were able to get up and go play. This is a very common activity throughout classrooms and what transitions can look like. All the way from cleaning up to going outside, there was probably what I described, maybe 7 or 8 different transitions the children had to make. And with those amount of transitions, we're really opening the door for challenging behaviors to occur. That's a lot of waiting. It's a lot of being in line. It's a lot of, moving in from one area to another area within the classroom. And so when we think about the number of transitions in our classroom, we want to try to keep it to as minimal as possible. Of course, there's always going to be transitions, but if we can keep it to as few as possible, that'll really help the children and the challenging behaviors occurring during those transition times. Another idea is to really try to think about how those transitions can be shorter. So what I just explained, that was about a 7 to 9 minute process within that classroom of all the children cleaning up, all the children using the bathroom, all the children getting outside to be able to play. That's a really long time for children to be in transition. And so if we can think about how to make those transitions much shorter for those children, in that example, potentially rather than everyone waiting on the carpet, they could have children start going to the bathroom while cleaning up or once they're done to kind of start that process so that they're not waiting in line. Those kinds of ideas, but really focusing on how our transitions can be much more quick and short. Less opportunities for those challenging behaviors to happen. Also, when during our transitions, we want to make them as engaging as possible. As I said, and as we know, transitions have to happen within our classrooms. That is what it is. But if we can make them engaging and not what this picture shows, not children standing in line with a bubble in their mouth and their hands behind their back, right? How can we make it fun? Can we sing a song? Can we do some type of animal activity, crawling? Everybody's going to hop to one area. Everybody's going to bear crawl. Everybody, make an animal sound. Something to make it fun and engaging so that the children their mind isn't set on what am I doing and what can I be doing? And I don't want to actually be walking in this line and I don't actually want to be doing this, but actually thinking about, oh, this is fun. I'm going to hop over here because I'm a bunny rabbit. Those kinds of things will really make more successful transitions. As well as those transitions can be used as learning opportunities. So how can we tiptoe and be quiet like a mouse? What elephant is a big animal and makes big footsteps? Who does marching? What kind of things like that? So if we can use a lot of our curriculums, will have opportunities, activities that we can use during our learning opportunities. So I think really thinking about how do we make them short, less often, and when they're happening to be fun or learning opportunities could really affect how our transitions are going within our classrooms and the amount of challenging behaviors we could experience. The next one is long periods of sitting. So typically, as a reminder, which oftentimes doesn't happen, is during a small or large group, that 4-year-olds should be sitting only between 8 to 12 minutes and no more than 12 minutes. That's really short when we think about it. And 5-year-olds it's only age and developmentally appropriate for them to be sitting between 12 and 18 minutes. And so when we're working with a classroom that maybe has a mixed age group, thinking about we really need to be focusing on who can be sitting the least amount of time, right? So if we have a majority of 4-year-olds, even though we have some 5-year-olds, we should really be in a group setting or sitting for more than 12 minutes. Also think about when we're arranging our schedules is sometimes they'll go from large group, which is a seated time. Maybe they sit, they read a book, they stand up, they do a song, they sit back down, they do something else. And then after large group time, they go directly into a small group activity at tables. Well, those are still 2 activities of sitting. So those 2 combined shouldn't be lasting any more than 12 minutes. Yeah. Because it's sitting after sitting. Even though they got up and moved, those are still sitting activities. So when we have children sit for too long, as you all know, what starts to happen? They start to entertain themselves. And when they entertain themselves, it's not typically in the behaviors we would like to see, right? Those are usually when those challenging behaviors, they start poking their friend, talking to their friend, getting up and walking around, becoming disruptive. Those things start to happen when we're asking children to sit too long. Even if it's an engaging activity, it's too long for them to be sitting. Someone's going to lose interest and someone's going to start to engage. And once one starts, sometimes we'll often see other children start to model the behaviors that they're seeing. And so I think it's important that we really set up our day with intention. As well as having the idea that if you want to have group sitting times for small group, for large group, for certain type of lessons, that's fine, but we should have shorter, more frequent types of that sitting. So going from large group do, something different, and then we can come back and do a small group activity or start a small group activity, then have free choice time or outside time, and then come back to another small group activity. And thinking about, if we're trying to think during large group, I have to teach them I want to read them this book and I want to teach this lesson and I want to have this social emotional activity with them. that these types of activities can be taught in a variety of different ways. Children don't need to be sitting in group settings or sitting at all in order to be presented to that. We can have those types of activities through play, and by us facilitating that play. We can have them through different areas of the classroom to expose them to the different emotional states, or we can teach them about different things through other means of activities. We can have sensory tables that we go over there and talk to them about the Three Little Pigs and what can be built with sand versus if we have some sticks versus if we have some blocks, thinking about different ways that we want to teach children activities or teach them curriculum besides just sitting in group settings, because at this age, they really learn through play. And so by offering more opportunities of that play, it's really actually still allowing them to learn, and actually the best way for them to learn through their hands and their eyes and their experiences is really teaching them so much more than what we could teach them in a group sitting down session. And so I'll share that one time I was even in a classroom and thinking about how long children should be sitting, and that I was watching this group. And so typically when I go into classrooms, when there's a large group or any type of seating activity, I start my timer because I want to see how long that they're expecting children to sit. So I started my timer. She was reading a book. She had a felt board. She had characters. The children were interactive. She had the book. It was a large book. It was a really great lesson. It was really engaging. I was, really into the lesson. And I was watching her, and she was doing a beautiful job. And majority of the children were really loving this activity. And then all of a sudden, I start to see children tip to the side, start to lay down, start to get up, start to fidget, start to move. And I can start to see the teacher starting to redirect the child. And so I looked at my watch, and we were at 13 minutes. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was having the time of my life watching this activity. And so I was, but it made sense because it really hit that mark. And you started to see not only one child, but a few children starting to have difficulty. And I was engaged. And so I think sometimes as adults, we really need to be reminded that time may seem a lot faster for us and a lot slower for children. So even though we don't realize that maybe 15, 16, 20 minutes have passed and we're trying to get through our day or activities that we had planned, that moves fast for us, but the children really only have this amount of time to work with. And so really being intentional with what do we want to do with the 12, 7, 10 minutes that we have these children and what's important, as well as being flexible if we may not get through everything that we want to get through that time. And if that's the case, then let's have another opportunity, or, maybe we can start to put the book in the library. We can put the book somewhere else and have those opportunities for the children to still learn what we wanted to get across during that time. And the last one that we talked about was really the free choice time. So free choice time sometimes can offer those opportunities for challenging behaviors because there's a lot of excitement. They get access to so many toys, and we don't know if other children have other opportunities to have toys during this time. And so really thinking about, do we have enough materials? If we know that blocks and cars are highly preferred and highly interested for a majority of our children in our classroom, we really need to make sure that we don't have one set of blocks and two cars, because at that point, we're really asking for behaviors to occur, right? And so making sure that we have a variety of blocks and a variety of cars or multiple baby dolls if we have children who love to do baby dolls, or dress up clothes for children who love to do dress up. By ensuring we have enough materials, we'll really have a smoother time during those free choice times, as well as we can extend learning, right? So we talked about how to integrate some of those topics or activities from just large group into other times of the day. And so extending learning, if we see a child who's playing in the sensory sand, how can we support them? How can we extend the learning? If all they know how to do is pour and build a castle, then what else can we do in there? And by teaching them new ways to play, we could really benefit how to keep them engaged during that time and new ways to play with the activities. It's not just always pouring through, but we can also do new and fun things. And if we teach them how to play, they will play and they will learn. Also, make sure that the toys and materials are developmentally and age appropriate, right? So if we have a child that is a little bit developmentally younger, then we want to make sure that we have toys there that are going to meet that developmental milestone for that child. As well as children who are advanced, we want to make sure that we have toys that are developmentally appropriate for them. Because we talked about when a child is bored or a child is frustrated, we know challenging behaviors can occur. So during these times of free choice, if we can set up the environment to support those children, there'll be less of those types of behaviors. As well as we want to rotate the toys on a regular basis. So typically it's between 2 to 3 months is kind of recommended, but we don't want the same toys out all the time. The more we can rotate the toys, then they come out, it builds new interest, they can learn new ways to play with toys, and it really just re-excites them when they see these new toys or setups within the classroom. And so again, having those type of opportunities and toys could help mitigate some of those challenging behaviors. We teach our children everything. We teach them how to wash their hands. We teach them how to sit down during group time. We teach them the letters. We teach them sounds. We teach them how to be a good friend. We also teach them we need to teach them how to play. Although children have some children really succeed in a certain style of play, not all children do. So really understanding how to teach the children how to play with the materials we want them. Because if we don't teach them how to play with our materials, they will teach themselves. And again, sometimes the way they teach themselves are I'm taking this wooden block and it's becoming a bowling ball and I'm throwing it at my friend, right? So really thinking about ways that we can teach children how to play with the materials, and that'll really expand that free choice time and provide opportunities for them to actually learn and play rather than getting bored and engaging in something more challenging. And then again, we want to make sure that we don't have too long of free choice time. So just having a balance within our day, making sure that the children are really balanced in their time throughout the day of structured and unstructured time. And we don't want to only have a free for range all the time, but really paying attention to where the children are and how they can be supported in those moments. And so that kind of just really, between those things that we've talked about with large group time and transitions and free choice time, it really brings us to having a balanced daily schedule. So we really want to make sure that when we're looking at classrooms, or if we are in a classroom, or if it's our classroom, we want to look at our daily schedule of how long are they in certain activities? Are they too long in sitting? Are they too long in play? Do they get enough outside time? Do they not get enough outside time? Really having how long are they in those activities and what's appropriate and developmentally, and having access to those items and activities. We also want to have a balance of those structured and unstructured times. Both are important. We do want the children to learn to be school ready, right? How to be in a classroom, how to be a good friend. And they're going to learn that through structured times and unstructured times. Having those opportunities for play and those experiences and real life problem solving is really going to be helpful for them. Also, we want to eliminate those unnecessary transitions, right? And we also want to provide ample number of opportunities for them to play. And we want to support all learners. So looking at having varied daily schedules. Some children, the whole class should have a daily schedule, but they don't need to all. Some children are going to need more support. Some children might need that arrival schedule for separation anxiety and to support them, but they don't need an entire individualized schedule, but they really need that arrival opportunity really broken down for them. Some children are going to need an individualized schedule. And so really thinking about how we can support all learners within our classroom through the varied types of daily schedules. And on here we see there's multiple different schedules. There's an individual schedule with a clip that's only a couple of items. We see a daily schedule that the classroom can interact with. We see a real life or a real item schedule and a timer to go along with it. So it's really more concrete for some of our more concrete learners. Here we see it is a very specific arrival schedule to help with those children maybe needing that. This is another type of daily individual schedule where the child gets to manipulate when they're all done with something and see their way through their day. And so we know that there is a lot of benefits from daily schedule. We know that it prepares the children for what will occur throughout the day. all of us as adults want a daily schedule. We want to have consistency. We probably use our phone for planners, or you may still have a paper planner. You probably make to-do lists. You do things to organize yourself and to know where you want to be, where you're going to be, and at what time you're going to be. And children want that consistency and predictability as well. And by having these schedules, it creates that consistency throughout their day, and we thrive on consistency. It creates order within the setting, right? So the children aren't wondering all the time, do I get to go outside? When do I get to have that? I'm feeling hungry. When is lunch? Do I get to have lunch? Do I have a snack today? It really creates order within our day by having these schedules in place. And it also reduces the anxiety and unknown. Think about if you were to show up to work and no one told you what you were going to do, when you had to leave, if you had a meeting, what time you had to be and where you had to be. Those types of things would provoke a lot of anxiety for you. And the same thing would happen with children. The difference is we can create our own schedule. We can ask those questions. They don't maybe have the ability to do that. They don't know how to create their own schedule. They don't get to create their own schedule. And they don't know maybe how to ask, hey, I'm feeling a little anxious right now. Can you tell me what time is lunch or what we're having for lunch? Or when do we get to go outside? They can't ask those types of questions yet. So we really need to create that consistency for them to reduce the unknown of what they get to do, when they get to do it. And by doing so, that really reduces the anxiety. And we can have both schedules for the classroom as well as individual schedules and activities. Another thing that really helps with understanding challenging behaviors and helping children know what we want them to do with their behavior, how we want them to engage, or what is expected to them is having behavior expectations. So here we really want to focus on really telling the children what we expect from them. And for us to understand that we shouldn't assume children know what to do. One example I have of this is I was at a site and it was after their winter break. So they had a couple weeks out of the classroom, and this was their first week back. It was about a Thursday, I believe, the end of the week. And a boy who I was there to help support the teacher in supporting him, he had some challenging behaviors, and they go outside and he has a toy that he was provided earlier in the classroom. And it was kind of his transitional item, and he was really into it. So he had been outside for a couple of minutes, and then all of a sudden he took the toy and threw it over the fence. And in doing so, he then became upset, and he said, hey, can you go get my toy? I really want my toy. My toy's on the other side. And the teachers are like, nope, we're not getting your toy. We're not going to get your toy. And I went over there and I said, we are going to go get his toy. And the teachers looked at me and said, why would we go get his toy? This is what he does all the time. He always throws his toy over, and he knows not to throw it. And I said, well, I've been here. And when we came outside, no one explained to him what it was expected for him to do with his toy. No one shared that he wasn't allowed to throw it over the toy. No one shared what they wanted him to do with it. No one told me what was being safe for that. So what we're going to go do is we're going to go get the toy from over the fence, and then we're going to bring the toy back, and we're going to share with him what we expect from this. We can share that, the toys stay on this side of the fence, that the toys stay in our hands, and I want them to then model what they want him to do with the toy. Take it over to the slide, have it go over there, play with a friend, ask someone to play with him. And then if he were to throw the toy over after explaining what the expectations were, then at that point, they can leave the toy on the other side of the fence and share that, we can try again next time we come out. And it was just a really clear understanding of, they thought or they assumed the child knew. And I don't know, maybe he did or maybe he didn't, but there was a lot of assumption there. And I think that we really need to be more supportive and aware of what we're expecting children to do and sharing and modeling those expectations with them. So when we create behavior expectations, we always obviously want to make sure that it's in a positive language, such as our toys stay on this side of the fence, not we don't throw toys over the fence, or we're going to use walking feet, not no running. We only want to have 3 to 5. So with this age of children between 3 and 5, that's really all they can handle. And think about, we only have 3 to 5, and it's going to look different across different areas of our day. Our behavior expectations for free time looks very different than our behavior expectations for rest time, or outside time looks very different from inside time. And so really, keeping it clear and simple with only 3 to 5 of them. And when we share what our expectations are, we want it to be simple and clear. We want to model for the children what it is. We're going to ask them to use an inside voice inside, but then we shouldn't be yelling at the child across the room of, hey, make sure you're sharing with your friend all the way across the room, if we're asking our children to use inside voices, but yet we're not using inside voices. as well as we need to consistently discuss and reinforce these expectations. So every day we should be going over this. And I see a lot of times at the beginning of the school year, classrooms do a really good job of sharing their expectations with the children and reviewing them. But as the year goes on, it kind of tapers off because we assume they know. And I think that's where our problem is. What do we take into account those breaks? Do we take into account a new child? Do we take into account that we need to consistently be telling them, yes, you're doing the right thing. Yes, those walking feet are beautiful. I love the way you were sharing with your friend. That's a great inside voice all the time, because if we don't, they forget and they start to do other things. And then we start focusing on the negative rather than the positive. So it's really important for us to just consistently discuss what those expectations are to create consistency for them, as well as really reinforce when we see them doing all the behaviors we want them to do so that they get reinforcement for what the positive is and not acknowledgement for the negative behaviors that they're engaging in. So with all of that being said, when thinking about challenging behaviors in a classroom, I think there's a couple of things that when we think that there's a challenging behavior or we're asked to support a challenging behavior, or someone comes to us and say, I need help in this classroom, here are the first few things that we can look for about how to help with those challenging behaviors. And the first thing would be, are we aware of any person biases? Are biases taking place to this perceived challenging behavior? Is this actually a challenging behavior, or is it something that maybe that person has a very low tolerance for? Is it this is a male child and this teacher is always finding male children that have difficulty? Or maybe there isn't, but it's something to take into account for. Next, we want to make sure that we see and understand that there is a relationship between the child, the teacher, and the family. Do we see that this teacher is nurturing and responsive to the child? Do we see that this teacher is loving towards that child? Do we see that this relationship exists with the child and the family? Because again, if there is no relationship at this point, that's where the starting point is. How do we help and support to build that relationship between the family, child, and teacher? Next, we can examine the structure and the balance and the usage of the daily schedule. The daily schedule is very important to be used, and we can have a daily schedule for adults and understanding where we are, and we can have a daily schedule for children. Is that daily schedule being implemented throughout the day? It's not just posted on the wall, permanent, never touched, or only touched during circle time. It should be interactive. It should be balanced in the activities. How long are they in activities? Is there a balance of structured and unstructured activities? When do they get to go outside? What does their outside time look like? Really taking a look of what that daily schedule looks like and how it's being used. Does a child or person need an individualized schedule? Do we need an arrival schedule? Do we need a mealtime schedule? Do we need to break down things further? So really just taking a look at that overall daily schedule and how it's being used. Next is play. Is there enough play, and how is it being used? Children learn through play at this age. That's what they need. They need to have experiences to play. They need to have those opportunities with their peers and with the toys and the activities that we provide. So are we allowing, is there enough play? And then when the play is occurring, what are we doing to support that play? Are we teaching them how to play? Are we expanding their play? And really taking that into consideration. And last, we can really look at, are the behavior expectations being utilized in a positive manner and consistently? So oftentimes in classrooms, I hear they have a beautiful song about, eyes are watching, hands are quiet, voices off during circle time. And they review it every single day, but they only review it during that circle time. And so really thinking about, is there any ways that we can more consistently support children in understanding what the behavior expectations are for the different areas or times of the day of our classroom, and are those being done? So these are kind of just a little quick checklist of where to start with the challenging behaviors when we think that they're occurring or when they are occurring, or how we can provide support. So at this time, that concludes my presentation for you guys today in understanding and supporting young children in challenging behaviors. If you have any interest in contacting me, my email is on here, which is Pakel_Janelle@lakeco.edu. Thank you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.